Hardly any other series has caused as much buzz this year as the South Korean Netflix project Squid Game. For weeks, we could hardly save ourselves from memes, discussions, and, sadly, many spoilers. Now that the excitement has died down a bit, we have a better perspective on what happened, which is why in today's original, we will not only explain the end of Season 1, but also share some thoughts on Season 2 as well. Of course, for those who haven't seen the first season yet, spoilers are imminent. Let's start with Season 1, which is full of symbols and subtle hints. First, let's take a look at the plot and the main characters of the most successful Netflix series of all time. The concept is quite simple. In a total of 6 South Korean children's games, 456 adults have to compete against each other. Almost all of them are heavily in debt and aim to take home the gigantic jackpot of 45.6 billion won, which is the equivalent of $38.6 million US. The crux of the matter, the children's games, which at first glance seem harmless, are modified in such a way that participants are disqualified at the slightest mistake. This is a very euphemistic way of saying that they are either killed by the game itself, as in red light, green light, or by one of the numerous supervisors if they fail a task, like in the game of marbles for example. Right from the first game, the players realize that the 6 tasks will not be a walk in the park because after the first round, not even half of the participants are left. Let's now briefly look at the most important characters. The focus is on Seong-yoon, who makes various acquaintances with other participants over the course of the games, including number 067, number 101, and number 001. Especially towards the end, Gi-Hun's friendship with his closest friend Jo Sang-woo takes the spotlight, and not only because the two are the last survivors of the 5 previous games. Now let's get to the important imagery that runs throughout the whole series. Firstly, there's the fact that the participants are obviously not treated as people but as objects. They lose their entire identity and are consistently addressed by the mysterious operators of the game with their participant number. In fact, this already begins in the first episode, when the unknown businessman suggests a round of the game Dachi to Gi-Hun, giving him money for every round he wins, but also a slap in the face for each time he loses. This is a preliminary test to determine whether the participants are even susceptible to being objectified. Indeed, the series conceals a lot more than mere social criticism. In the show, poor is not synonymous with good, and those who are rich are not necessarily evil. The boundaries between participants, supervisors, and the frontmen are vague, which is demonstrated not least by the fact that police officer Jun-Ho finds his sorely missed brother behind the frontman's mask rather than in the morgue. The same goes for the so-called VIPs and their competitors. Many of them get into their desperate situation through gambling addiction and put their lives on the line, not least because of it. But are the VIPs so much better? Aren't they the ones who bet astronomical sums on the game players because being mere spectators doesn't give them enough thrills? A similar symbolism concerns the 2 childhood friends Gi-Hun and Sang-woo. In the final game, they are the very ones facing each other. The two who at first sight could not be any more different. Gi-Hun seems to be the gambling-addicted loser who doesn't take care of his daughter and still lives with his mother because he cannot afford his own apartment due to his compulsive gambling. Sang-woo, on the other hand, is the successful businessman who appears to be the only one who has made it from the bottom to the top and is the pride and joy of his family. The longer you observe him, the clearer it becomes that he's not a whit better than Gi-Hun. In fact, the opposite is true because not only does he flat out lie to his mother, he has also raised his own gambling addiction to a much higher level by using his company's funds. So the coin toss that takes place at the beginning of the 6th game is actually emblematic of the 2 friends. They both represent a part of the same coin. At the end, when Gi-Hun suggests that they both leave the game with no prize in exchange for their lives, Sang-woo opts to end his life. His very existence would be worth nothing without the prize, and in any case, he would never have been able to face his mother again, ashamed of his own ruthlessness. After all, he had been her pride and joy. So in the end, Gi-Hun wins the Squid Game and thus the entire competition. He is simply dumped on a street, of course not without the gigantic prize of 45.6 billion won in a specially set up bank account, as well as the card that goes with it. The series eventually jumps a year into the future, and the viewer is confronted with the reality that this severely traumatized Gi-Hun is living even worse than he did before. He has not used any of the money in his bank account, and it appears that he would rather have returned to his old life without money in exchange for Sang-woo. Thus, the money is more or less an unnecessary burden that he didn't want in the end. For the viewer, this is a rather unsatisfying ending because although hardly anyone felt much sympathy for the often completely exaggerated Gi-Hun, one at least wished that he would do something with the money eventually, for instance, by taking care of his daughter or the surviving relatives of his teammates, or at the very least live a somewhat carefree life. Then, out of nowhere, he gets an invitation from Player 001, the friend he actually thought was dead, whom he shamelessly deceived at first glance during the game of marbles. The plot twist that 001 is actually the mastermind behind the games was definitely not anticipated by many. The actually lovable and terminally ill old man was too funny and authentic. Ultimately, it turns out that he conceived the game purely for the thrills it would give him and his VIPs. The only genuine thing about his faked-up story is the brain tumor that has since confined him to bed. He bets that no one will help the dying homeless man across the street before he freezes to death miserably. After all, his premise is that all people are fundamentally selfish. Number 001 dies in the course of the encounter, but more importantly, the homeless man is actually rescued by strangers. As a result, Gi-Hun is given a wake-up call and finally sees some meaning in his life, and that is to end the cruel games once and for all and be in control of his own destiny with the money he has won. He ends up being seen at the airport with a fancy suit and a new hair color. The red hair is probably the most important symbol, especially with a possible second season in mind. Throughout the series, the colors green and red have a superior meaning. While the green suits with the numbers embroidered on them stand for the helplessness of the participants, their color red symbolizes power. Not least because all the game's organizers wear red suits throughout the show. Now Gi-Hun himself wears red hair, obviously because he has become powerful. However, he does not want to use his power for cruel games, instead he wants to use it for the good. For example, for Se-byuk's brother, whom he entrusts to the care of Sung-woo's mother along with a large sum of money. At a subway station, he eventually realizes that the games are still taking place, which is why he henceforth makes it his mission to avenge all the dead participants and ruin the games. So much for the end of the first season. Much more important, though, is the question of what the plot might consist of if there is to be a second season. In the following, we have prepared a few possibilities we believe could actually happen in this or a similar way. The first and most obvious theory is that Gi-Hun will do everything in his power to end the games. He will either return as a participant to wreck the games more or less from within, or he will somehow sneak in as a guard, similar to what the police officer did in the first season. He becomes the honorable avenger of all those who were objectified and lost their lives. Perhaps in the end there will even be a face-off between the frontman and Gi-Hun. This theory may seem obvious since it would tie in directly with Season 1, yet the entertainment value would not be nearly as great as it was in the first season since it would lack that new certain something. Another aspect we can think of is that the story of the two brothers, Jun-Ho and Jun-Ho, may not be over yet. Jun-Ho ended up being shot by his brother and falling off a cliff into the sea. In most movies, this doesn't mean anything, especially when someone who's presumed dead is suddenly out of sight. It is almost a guarantee that the person who has miraculously survived. Related to this could be the telling of the frontman's backstory. How did he manage to survive all of the games, and why did he choose to run them after winning? Season 2 could thus become a mix of the frontman's story and a vengeful alliance between the survivor Jun-Ho and Gi-Hun. In fact, we consider this to be one of the most likely scenarios, not only because series creator Hwang Dong-hyuk has already confirmed during an interview with The Times that he would be interested in exploring the frontman's story in a possible second season. It is also not too far-fetched to assume that Season 2 will revolve around the manipulator Il-nam. His number 001 could be emblematic of the very first Squid Game, which the new season could take a closer look at. We would meet the first VIPs, get a glimpse behind the scenes, and witness how the games are becoming progressively more professional. This could also mean that we get to see more violent games than in Season 1, as they have never been tested on real people before and could therefore be even more deadly. Along the way, Il-nam's story and motivation could also be told. This is certainly not the preference of many viewers, but it is still feasible. Lastly, we would like to share with you another exciting theory that is somewhat in line with our first theory. Gi-Hun tries to end the games and eventually becomes the frontman himself. In fact, this is a very classic ending for a series like this. However, it bugs us that the character development of Gi-Hun would have to undergo a 180 turn in order to make it credible. Still, there's no reason not to assume that this is exactly what happened with the current frontman Jun-Ho. Maybe he too wanted to put an end to the entire thing, but then decided to become the frontman himself due to various reasons. The interesting part of this theory is that there would be room for many other theories as well. So it is possible that Gi-Hun and Jun-Ho team up to stop the frontman, but by a plot twist, Gi-Hun ends up killing both the frontman and Jun-Ho and emerges as the overpowering leader of the games. We feel there are enough theories out there that are far less plausible. So much for our latest original. Now we are interested in your opinion. Are you convinced by our theories, and if so, which ones do you think are likely? Perhaps you even have a hunch yourself. Feel free to let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, leave us a like and subscribe to us. See you next time.